The feminine, part 5. To discern most clearly the nature of the third feature of the epic cosmos, the masculine-feminine conjunction, one can turn to an epic only recently known to the literary world, the Lay of Igor's Campaign, discovered as were Gilgamesh and Beowulf in the late 18th century, but known to the literary world only in the 19th, and coming to the attention of critics in the 20th. The Igor epic, though brief, is no heroic lay or gesta, as it has sometimes been called, but a poetic account of an entire cosmos coming into being. It is, in short, an epic by virtue of giving form to the myth of a people, and by placing that myth within a larger myth, a moral universe. As in all kinds of genres, since an ideal form is the basis for establishing the kind of a grouping, a newly discovered epic that fits into the assembly may not only reaffirm the shared elements of the group, but bring to the foreground and thus highlight aspects previously unnoticed. In this instance, highlight this please. In this instance, the chief feature that illumines the world shared by other epics is the affinity of the feminine with the earth and the power of the feminine to affect the course of action. Okay, so remember in an epic that the myth of a people, I think I've talked about this a little bit in the past, but the smaller myths of a people fit into the larger myth of the whole people. Does that make sense? So in America, you have the smaller myths of, well, you have the myth of the Native American myth, and these are just stories, right? You have African American myths, you have Anglo-American myths, you have LGBT myths, you have the myth of the WASP, of white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, right? You have all these little stories that fall underneath the myth of America. And so that's what she's talking about here, is that any people's myth is going to fall under a larger overarching myth. Okay. The Igor poet had the same problem as the Beowulf poet 4 centuries earlier, to view a declining paganism through Christian eyes without deprecating its genuine virtues, indeed enhancing, page 18 please, and ennobling its qualities so they might be taken into the new order without loss. These poets therefore situate their allegiance in the past, though their imaginations are Christian, and their aspirations are for a transformed order that is yet to come. Hence, at a time of profound cultural shift, the Igor epic apprehends the mysterious entity that has been variously called the idea or the soul of Russia. So she's talking about a myth of Russia right now, so it's not really a big deal. The takeaway from these paragraphs is that the smaller myth fits under the larger myth. So the Igor myth would fit under the larger myth of Russia. Okay, so she's just giving an example. Highlight this next part. If we read epic poems with attentiveness, putting aside preconceived ideas about the dominance of the patriarchal virtues, we see in them something of a palimpsest, indicating that nations are not only twice, but thrice born. Stop. In the familiar Greek accounting, circle palimpsest, by the way. Somebody, can you look that up for me and put it in the chat? Palimpsest. I could do it too. Okay, I'm putting it in the chat here. Something reused or altered. So you can write this in the margins. Circle that word. Person who, that must be a different definition of palimpsest. The way she's using it here is something reused or altered, but still bearing traces of an earlier form. So you would think about this, if you were thinking about it simply, maybe like a water bottle that has been, was like taken from car parts or something, right? So you have all these different ways to recycle. So she's talking about virtues that get recycled and reorganized in a new myth. Make sense? Okay. In the familiar Greek accounting, before the accession of the Olympians, the Titans ruled, and before them Gaia and Uranus. We tend to think these ancestral parents safely done away with and forgotten. Might they not, however, in the aggregate means the whole, the total of time, still be to us analogically? Could we possibly think that epics depict the human struggle to retain, highlight this, could we possibly think that epics depict this human struggle to retain all three sets of gods, all three stages of human culture? Keep going. Certainly we see that the first two Western epics, the Iliad and the Odyssey, stand at midpoint between the warrior code and the coming of the polis, which is a city ruled by reason and justice. Keep going. Yet is there not underneath all the masculine furor about honor, a deeper and more pervasive presence? In the stirring accounts of heroes, one senses the subliminal, which means under the surface, presence of a more ancient feminine culture, perhaps stemming from the old religion, the matriarchal worship of the great goddess. Stop. Okay, so the great goddess was Gaia, Mother Earth, right? Before patriarchy even took over, before you had the rule of men, you had Gaia, we would call her Mother Earth. So just as I've told you before that the feminine is a boat, right? And the masculine is a mast, which moves the boat. So you think about the masculine as the patriarchy, which moves society forward because it's moving for honor. It wants that kleos, that wants that nobility. But something has to hold it while it moves. It can't just be a mast moving across a sea. It needs a boat. Okay? So the boat is the earth, which is why a boat would look like a womb. Okay? So you definitely have an image of generation and regeneration, because you do have that procreation image. Okay, trying not to get too weird here, but you do have the image of regeneration, which would be children and making the earth move, the world move forward. Okay. One thinks of the empathy of Thetis. So Thetis is the goddess mother of Achilles. She's who makes him a demigod. He has a mortal father, but who comes immediately in response to her son, Achilles' grief, the independence of Hera, enlisting Athena to fight at her side, the stature of Andromache and Hecuba, the archetypal beauty of Helen. And of course, there is the wide-seeing Periphonos, authority of Penelope. The Odyssey is full of women who seem to rule the universe and govern the conditions under which the hero returns. Certainly one finds traces of this divine feminine presence in Russian epic literature. George Fedotov has spoken of the cult of the earth among the ancient Russians, linking it with the most secret and deep religious feelings of the folk. He goes on to say, at every step in studying Russian popular religion, one meets the constant longing for a divine female power. Is it too daring to hypothesize on the basis of this religious propensity the scattered elements of the cult of the great goddess who had once reigned upon the immense Russian plains? So what this is saying is that even in the midst of the patriarchy moving society forward, there's still a longing for a mother, for a goddess, a female power to hold on to the movement. Okay. So on page 18, Dr. Cowan was just giving us examples of great feminine power. Okay, that held. What does subliminal mean? It means underneath the surface. If you were wondering. I'll write that in the chat. Okay, we're going to skip page 19. It's just more examples of feminine. She gives a lot of examples here. 20, if you go on to 20, Actually, the very last line of 19, where it says Thetis, Achilles' mother. So I'm on the last line. Thetis, Achilles' mother, speaks in the Iliad to Zeus in, top of 20, on behalf of her son Achilles, for instance, or Athena for Odysseus, as Venus, Aeneas' mother, speaks to Jupiter. Even further, Yaroslavna, Russian epic, speaks with great intimacy and authority to the cosmic elements themselves, not to the supreme god over them, as others do. She reproaches these elements, reproves them, beseeches and commands them. Only Hera among great Greek goddesses addresses the elements directly. Okay, go to the last paragraph on 20, where it says viewed intertextually. Intertextualist means within the text itself, so within the book. Viewed intertextually, the above, which I didn't read, is the moment about which Thomas Green speaks, in which the epic hero, highlight this, the epic hero, caught in an apparently helpless situation, in stasis. Stasis simply means, I'll put it in the chat, no movement. Is aided by, keep highlighting, by an emissary god or angel from heaven bringing a message to earth. Keep highlighting, and though the messenger is usually masculine, the power that causes the celestial intrusion is feminine. Stop. Trying to explain this simply for you guys. So when the hero can't go anywhere, a feminine presence will appear to him. Okay? And she, an angel or a god, is bringing a message to the earth from the heavens. Excuse me, it's a male god or angel is bringing a message from the heaven, but the power that causes that movement is feminine. Okay? We'll talk, we're going to get more into this later as we give examples, but just for now, hold on to that. The fact that the movement comes from God, the messenger to the person is masculine. So we're just working on feminine masculine balance. Okay? Go to page 21. I'll just read this. I'm not going to, just going to give examples which might help you understand. Top of 21. In the Divine Comedy, a gracious lady in heaven whose pity outweighs divine judgment appeals to St. Lucy, who then turns to Beatrice, who sends a poet, Virgil, to Dante, as guide out of the dark forest. In the African window epic, only the entreaties and intrusion of a beautiful aunt-mother figure, Iangura, enabled the hero to succeed. In Beloved, remember I told you about Beloved? The one about how Sethe had to either kill her children or send them into slavery. Yeah. Did I tell you? Annabelle, do you remember this? Where it says 124 was spiteful? No? Did I tell you about this, Alan? Do you remember? Okay, well... In Beloved, the daughter Denver causes the troops of women to be mustered, sufficiently strong to make a wave of sound wide enough to sound deep water and knock the pods off chestnut trees, and ultimately to exorcise the devil child. In Isabel Allende's The House of Spirits, Alba's long-departed grandmother appears to the young woman in her solitary prison cell, moving her out of the darkest moment of despair and longing for death. When she nearly achieved her goal, her grandmother Clara, whom she had invoked so many times to help her die, appeared with the novel idea that the point was not to die, since death came anyway, but to survive, which would be a miracle. That's beautiful. Okay, highlight this. This is the important part. Well, this is the bigger idea. It is not too inconceivable then to maintain that hidden within the masculine action of the epic structure are elements of the ancient Greek goddess, the mediatrix of grace, the intercessor, and that her version of history offsets and alters the grim march of events. Stop. Actually, one more sentence. It is an answer to her reproaches and commands that the hero finds his path. Now you can stop. Okay, intercessor. What does intercessor mean? Someone who goes in between. What does reproaches mean? Scolds. Reproaches means to scold. How dare you try and move so fast? Slow down, the great mother says. So the masculine like to move fast. Let's just get this done, get it out of the way, and move on with our lives without actually slowing down to think about what is the lesson here? Why aren't things working out? So the great goddess then is the person who slows everything down and comes in between and says, yes, Annabelle. Yes, very good question. Yep. The feminine comes in and says, let's slow this down. Okay, we got to slow down. Otherwise, things are not going to work out. Okay, we're going too fast. That's what happens in a tragedy. All right, things go too fast. Think about the nurse in Romeo and Juliet. She's the example of the feminine trying to slow things down. They don't listen to her. Right away in Act 1, she tells Juliet, what are you doing? This is ridiculous. And Juliet's like, oh, I love him. He's great. Okay, so no, she should have listened to the old lady, the great feminine. All right? Think about your grandmothers. I have two amazing grandmothers. One is passed and one is still alive. She's 98. But they're amazing. And I always tell my mom, before your mom dies, you got to get the stories. Okay, you got to get the stories from her. And I oftentimes, my paternal, my dad's mother, her presence in my body will slow me down. I know that sounds weird, and maybe you have that relationship with the elders in your family, and if you do, that's beautiful. Because somebody's got to slow us down when we move too fast, and usually it's your grandma, right, Genesis? You have a good grandma, Genesis? She slows you down? She says, slow down, girl. You're going too fast. Okay, my grandma used to always say that. Talking too fast, Vicky. Slow down. Slow down. Okay, grandma. Actually, we called her Mamo. And Anaya, you got a good grandma? Yeah, I see you smiling, so I figured. All right, let's keep going here. As the Igor poet tells us, God shows Prince Igor the way. Highlight this. The way is the way of hope and grace out of his seeming hopelessness and despair. Stop. I can't read. In his difficult escape, nature is friendly to him, aiding him, hiding him, lending him its powers, the river cradling him, the usually noisy birds falling silent with only the woodpeckers, with their tapping showing the way to the river. Remember we talked about how nature in a modern epic will become a substitute for the goddess? Well, it's not really a substitute because if you think about it, Gaia is Mother Earth. So nature itself becomes the thing that slows us down. And in this case, it was these woodpeckers tapping and showing the way. Okay, highlight this. Although it is the masculine prowess in thymos, okay, circle that word, it means spiritedness. So that's the Greek word for spiritedness, which is that energy and that go-get-it type of spirit that that usually is associated with the masculine. So keep highlighting. The masculine prowess in thymos, or you could say thumos here, that's how I say it, that undertakes the heroic task. It is with the help of feminine wisdom and courage that it is accomplished. These powers work together in the epic in a way not depicted in other genres. Keep highlighting. In tragedy, for instance, the masculine protagonist, top of 22, the masculine protagonist is in revolt against the mothers. It is this guilt that haunts him in his over-rational hubris. Hubris is too much, well, it's too much of something. It's usually too much sin. So too much pride, too much lust, too much of something that is bad for you, right? Okay, keep going, keep highlighting. In contrast to this, the victimization of women in tragedy, both comedy and lyric poetry, portray the feminine aspects of the psyche as dominant. Stop. Beatrice and Shulamite, for instance, represent the recognized right order of being in the Divine Comedy and Song of Songs, and in Donne's Twickenham Garden, the lover is compelled to admit ruefully that her truth kills me. Okay. I'm not sure about y'all, but for me, it was always the women in my family, the feminine, that were like always the ones telling me the truth, like whatever the truth was. It seemed like the men just wanted to move quickly through things. The masculine just kind of wanted to get it over with and move on. Highlight this. In epic, on the contrary, the forces are balanced. For every towering male figure, there exists a female fully as imposing. Eve, Helen, Penelope, Sarah, Ishtar, Dido, Beatrice, Yaroslavna, Iangura, Setha. The Moses epic is a story framed by the secret purposes of the feminine. Indeed, throughout the Old Testament, as persons of recognized power, women have their own way of knowing, and the outcome of history bears the mark of their efficacy. Stop. So efficacy means basically efficiency, like they're being effective. Okay, you could just say effectiveness there. So although women take almost a back seat to the men when it comes to moving society forward, without them, it doesn't happen. The Bible is an epic. Most parts are, yes. Think about the Bible. It's a movement from. I'm answering Vincent's question in the chat. If you think about the Israelites, right, moving out of Egypt, they're moved out. Moses moves them out to try and go to a new Jerusalem. So Moses is the epic hero, right? And God himself, the Old Testament God, is the one providing the language or the impetus to keep them moving. So when they stop in the middle and they're like, "Hey, let's melt some gold and make a calf. This looks awesome." And Moses is like, "What are you doing? We have a vision and you guys are not listening to me." Okay? And they're like, "Yeah, but this is boring. We want to do something fun, like make golden calves and stuff. Why aren't we eating?" He's like, "Just let God help you." All right, here we go. It is perhaps surprising to find that epic gives us our best portrayals of marriage as a powerful institution. Why is that? Why is marriage between a feminine and a masculine so powerful? Yes, Tyrese. Balance. Yes, balance. You got too much masculine and the feminine's back there going, what's my role in this? Why am I even here? Too much feminine, and the man's going, am I really even a man? Like, what am I even doing here? My wife does everything. Okay, so there's got to be that balance. The biblical Adam and Eve in their original unity, like Zeus and Hera in their hieros gamos, set a pattern for the regenerative power of the wedded pair. The image found again in Abraham and Sarah, Odysseus, Penelope, Aeneas, Lavinia, Milton's Adam and Eve, among others, including the great ocean in Moby Dick and the wilderness in Go Down Moses. Highlight this last line. The epic assumes that the sacred marriage of two equal and complementary powers is possible, and that in that wedding, the whole world is renewed. Stop. If you want a world renewed, you have to balance the masculine and the feminine. If you're wondering why our world is out of sorts right now, is we have too much of one or the other. Which one do you think it is? Not a trick question. The answer is really obvious. Yes, masculine. Yeah, people, and this is not just men, but the whole idea that everyone wants to move fast and not think about stuff, because thinking about stuff is sometimes really painful, as she's noted here in the whole essay up to this point. Slowing down and really, understanding what's going on. Period. I mean, toxic masculinity, that's kind of where we're at. And if you think about it in the Greek sense, yes, that's what it is. If you have too much of the masculine moving society forward and not enough of the feminine holding it back and saying, slow down and think about what you're doing. Is this a good decision? Society's out of balance and we can all feel it. Okay? All right, I'm going to stop there.